Lin Wanqiu had firmly held Su Bai's hand and had begun pulling him away, urgently stating that they should leave quickly. She had pointed out that while the monsters were distracted, they had a chance to escape, and if the creatures noticed them, she had feared they wouldn't make it out alive. With a natural expression, Su Bai had asked her if she wasn't going to save her classmates, reminding her that they were part of the same group. Without hesitation, Lin Wanqiu had responded that if the circumstances had allowed, she might have considered helping them, but at that moment, she couldn't afford to put him in danger. Upon hearing her words, Su Bai had smiled faintly and had quietly mused to himself that such a statement was something his treacherous disciple would never have said. It had seemed to him that Lin Wanqiu was indeed just an ordinary girl. At that moment, a young man with black hair had noticed Lin Wanqiu and had desperately called out to her, waving his hand frantically. He had shouted that they couldn't hold on much longer and had pleaded for her help. Lin Wanqiu's face had filled with anxiety as she had identified the young man as Li Mingxian and had quickly realized that he was trying to drag them down with him. Before she could have reacted further, Lin Wanqiu had been suddenly shocked to see a horde of zombies approaching in their direction. Fear had taken hold of her as she had screamed, warning that the creatures were coming their way. Trembling as she held her face, tears welling up in her eyes, and had apologized to Su Bai, blaming herself for the situation. Maintaining his composure, Su Bai had reassured Lin Wanqiu and had instructed her to step back. Without hesitation, he had summoned his magic weapon, the 10,000 Souls banner, and had unleashed his own horde of zombies. Without hesitation, he summoned his zombies using his magic weapon, the 10,000 Souls banner. With a majestic expression, he had declared that he had once slain the 9 Nether Demon Lord himself and had questioned whether such lowly undead creatures could ever hope to take his life. Following his command, Su Bai's zombies had charged forward, slashing through the ordinary zombies, cutting their bodies into pieces one by one. However, as the battle had raged on, the overwhelming number of foes had complicated the situation. Su Bai had soon lost one of his summoned zombies, while the others had struggled to keep up the fight. Recognizing the danger, Su Bai had anxiously muttered to himself that the situation was unfavorable. He had realized that with his current strength, controlling so many zombies at once was already pushing his limits. He had needed to find a way to lure the monsters away, only then would they have had a chance to escape. Turning to Lin Wanqiu while fending off the attacking zombies, he had urgently asked if there was anything nearby that could create a loud noise to distract them. After a brief moment of deep thought, Lin Wanqiu had suddenly taken out her phone and had handed it to him, suggesting that he use it. Su Bai had hesitantly taken the device, his face contorting with discomfort. It had been his first time holding a phone in that life, and he had had no idea how to use it. Lin Wanqiu had shown Su Bai how to operate the device by playing loud music, which immediately grabbed the attention of all the zombies in the area. At that moment, the undead began rushing toward them. With great confidence, Su Bai had smiled and remarked what a great treasure it was. Then, without hesitation, he had thrown the phone as far as he could. One of his summoned zombies had caught it midair and had started running in the opposite direction, successfully luring many of the normal zombies away with the sound of the music. As soon as the schoolyard had cleared, Su Bai had grabbed Lin Wanqiu's arm and had started pulling her along, while urging her not to just stand there but to run. However, Lin Wanqiu had pleaded with him to slow down. Once they had entered the school building, Lin Wanqiu had looked exhausted, panting heavily. After catching her breath, she had expressed her gratitude, telling Su Bai that she truly owed him once again. She had admitted that if it weren't for him, she wouldn't have made it that far. While tying a red ribbon around his weapon, Su Bai had casually responded that it was fine. He had pointed out that she had helped him locate the higher-tier zombies, and in return he had kept her safe. They both got what they needed. Just then, the 3 young men who had been fighting the zombies moments ago had entered the school building. After making sure the door was fully closed, Li Mingxian, the one with black hair, had sighed in relief and remarked that they had made it. He had noted how fortunate they were that the zombies had suddenly run off. Otherwise, they would have been dead. At that moment, he had noticed Lin Wanqiu and, with a smile, had expressed his relief that she had made it out safely as well. Following this, Li Mingxian had noticed the backpack on Lin Wanqiu's shoulder and had immediately asked her if she had returned with supplies. Overjoyed, he had exclaimed that they were saved. Gathering around her, the young man with short hair had eagerly opened the backpack to check its contents. His face had lit up with excitement as he had announced that there was a lot of stuff inside. Lin Wanqiu, reacting swiftly, had stepped back closer to Su Bai while firmly stating that the supplies had been obtained by him, and she had no right to distribute them on his behalf. Upon hearing this, Li Mingxian had become furious and had snapped at Lin Wanqiu, questioning why she was trying to distinguish between personal and shared belongings in such desperate times. He had insisted that there were still other students who needed the supplies to survive and had demanded that she hand over some immediately. At that moment, the young man with glasses had stepped forward, attempting to diffuse the tension. He had urged them to stop arguing, pointing out that the area wasn't safe. He had suggested that they return to the classroom first and then discuss how to distribute the supplies. Turning towards Su Bai with a smile, he had invited him to join them, reasoning that strength lay in numbers. As they had started walking toward the classroom, Lin Wanqiu had turned to Su Bai, embarrassment evident on her face, and had apologized. She had reassured him that she wouldn't let them take his supplies. Su Bai, unfazed, had simply replied that it was fine, as his only goal was to find the advanced zombie. However, he had questioned how she could be sure that the others would listen to her. Lin Wanqiu had responded with confidence, assuring him that there were many teachers among the survivors, so the others wouldn't dare to cause trouble. Su Bai's gaze hardened as he issued a warning, stating that they had better not even think about trying anything. Meanwhile, Li Mingxian and his friends had been quietly glaring at Su Bai. Just then, the short-haired young man had leaned toward Li Mingxian and had whispered that he had clearly seen the bag was full of food. With those supplies, he had calculated that they could sustain themselves for at least a month, long enough for a rescue to arrive. Li Mingxian had acknowledged this but had expressed concern about whether Lin Wanqiu would agree to share. He had also questioned Su Bai's presence. Amidst their conversation, the man with glasses had smirked wickedly and had remarked that now that Lin Wanqiu and Su Bai were in their territory, they wouldn't have much of a choice. He had added that if they behaved properly, they might receive something, but otherwise they wouldn't have anyone to blame if something happened to them. Upon reaching the classroom, Li Mingxian knocked on the door and called out, identifying himself and announcing that they had returned with supplies. At that moment, a young woman with a tired expression had opened the door. Relief had washed over her face as she had exclaimed that they were finally back and had immediately asked about the supplies. As they had entered the classroom, Su Bai had scanned his surroundings, taking in the sight of the weary survivors. He had muttered to himself, wondering how they had managed to survive for so long. It had seemed to him that the zombies hadn't been around for too long. At that moment, the man with glasses had turned to Lin Wanqiu and had urged her to distribute the supplies quickly, explaining that they hadn't eaten in 3 days. Letting out a sigh, Lin Wanqiu had agreed but had made it clear that she could only give them half of the supplies at most. She had firmly stated that the other half belonged to Su Bai and that they were not allowed to touch it. At that moment, Li Mingxian had pointed a finger toward Su Bai and had questioned why he needed so many supplies. With a sinister smile, he had added that if necessary, he could simply pay for them. He had assured everyone not to worry, offering to pay 10 times the market price. Then, turning to Su Bai, he had smugly asked if he would mind such an arrangement. Realizing their intentions, Su Bai had responded confidently that he had no objections. As Li Mingxian had crouched to inspect the supplies, he had casually remarked that Su Bai was a smart man. Suddenly, a zombie's claw had appeared near Li Mingxuan's neck, sending shivers of fear through him. Panic had spread instantly as students and teachers had screamed in terror, scrambling to escape while crying out in alarm. One had frantically shouted, demanding to know where the monster had come from. Another had accused Li Mingxuan's group of bringing it inside, insisting they had been warned not to return. With a trembling voice, Li Mingxian had quickly denied responsibility, pointing instead at Su Bai. He had insisted that the monster had been created by the man standing next to Lin Wanqiu. At that moment, Su Bai had approached Li Mingxian, grabbing him roughly by the collar. His voice had been calm yet threatening as he had reminded him that he had already caused the loss of 2 of his undead and still had the audacity to demand a share of his supplies. Fearful for his life, Li Mingxian had desperately pleaded, calling Su Bai Big Brother and begging to talk things over. However, Su Bai had no interest in listening to his excuses. Without hesitation, he had thrown Li Mingxian to the ground and stomped on his chest with such force that he had coughed up blood. Exuding dominance, Su Bai had loomed over him and had asked coldly whether he should kill him, questioning whether he should take his soul to compensate for his loss. Terrified, Li Mingxian had turned to his friends, Zhang Hao and Gu Ming, begging them to help plead for mercy. He had reminded them that they had come up with the plan together. Both of his so-called friends had immediately denied the accusation. Zhang Hao had quickly turned to Su Bai and insisted that the plan to fight for the supplies had been entirely Li Mingxuan's idea and that they had known nothing about it. Even the man with glasses had nodded in agreement, eagerly supporting their claim. He had declared that the one responsible should face the consequences and had begged Su Bai to spare them, calling them irrelevant bystanders. Feeling utterly betrayed, Li Mingxian had screamed at them in fury, his voice breaking as tears streamed down his face. He had reminded them that he had fought for the supplies for their sake, only to be abandoned in the end. He had accused them of throwing him aside just to gain favor with Lin Wanqiu and Su Bai. Desperate, he had turned to Lin Wanqiu, pleading with her for help. He had admitted that he had been wrong, swearing that he no longer wanted the supplies and begging for forgiveness. At that moment, Su Bai had shifted his gaze to Lin Wanqiu, murmuring to himself as he wondered how she would respond. The ruthless Lin Wanqiu of the past wouldn't have even considered helping them. Letting out a sigh, Lin Wanqiu had turned to Su Bai and, after a brief pause, had asked him to spare Li Mingxian. She had acknowledged that he had been in the wrong but had urged Su Bai to forgive him this time for the sake of everyone else. Offering a compromise, she had suggested that they take her share of the supplies, ensuring that Su Bai's portion would remain untouched. Looking at Lin Wanqiu with mixed feelings, Su Bai whispered to himself, noting that her nature did not match his memories. Perhaps she only resembled the person he once knew. If that were the case, there was no reason to keep her by his side any longer. After moving his foot away from Li Mingxian, Su Bai summoned his zombie back and turned to Lin Wanqiu. He then stated that their deal had been concluded. She had found her companions, so it was time for them to part ways. He informed her that he would now continue his search for the advanced zombie. At that moment, Lin Wanqiu suddenly grabbed his hand, pleading for him to wait. She told him that she might know the location of the monster he was looking for. Upon hearing this, Su Bai immediately turned to her and asked in surprise whether she had seen the creature. With a pale expression, Lin Wanqiu shook her head and admitted that she had not seen it directly. However, she explained that she had vaguely sensed something odd within the school. The aura it emitted had terrified her. She confessed that she was unsure whether it was the advanced zombie Su Bai had mentioned. Listening to her words, Su Bai was utterly shocked. Muttering under his breath, he questioned in disbelief. The innate spiritual physique? The special ability to sense spiritual power? There was no one else in the world with this physique except for her. His mind raced as he began to question whether the woman before him was actually the person he thought she was.